The spiritual journey is ultimately a very lonely journey. It's lonely because however much help we get from outside, however much assistance and guidance and love and support, or lack of that, we are really in this alone. This is our private excursion. And most of us experience the sensation of being ill-equipped for this ride. We don't have an operating manual, we don't have a pamphlet telling us this is where we're headed, this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you get there. We do have people who claim to be able to guide us and advise us. We have writings of people from centuries ago who claim to have arrived at something that sounds right and desirable. We have teachers who tell us how to move forward. We have parents and friends and cohorts who are all willing to give us prescriptions for the next step in our life. But we all know deep inside that we just have ourselves. We just have ourselves. And we are not really equipped for this ride in the intellectual or emotional or even physiological sense. It's too unpredictable. It's too full of questionable reality. We think we're headed in one direction and suddenly we're headed in another. The rules of the game seem to shift continually. There is a randomness in our lives that really does not make for a sense of security. And there's a kind of underlying doubt and fear. Not to be overly negative here, but these are all things we are dealing with. And the question is, how do I get to a place of trust? How do I get to a place of knowing? How do I get to a place where I can feel what I'm supposed to be doing, where I'm heading, how to deal with the next week, the next month, the next moment? What's the guiding factor? And I've talked about this a lot recently. This idea that there is a kind of roadmap, and it's not a roadmap that's on printed paper. It's not a roadmap that anybody else can give you. It's a roadmap that comes out of a kind of deep trust in the journey. A deep trust. And so often we feel betrayed by what the journey has to offer. People we trust in our lives prove sometimes not to be trustworthy, or they disappear before we can acquire all we need to know from them. The books we read seem to be important, and they lead us in certain directions, and then the book ends and we're not there. The people we love make us comfortable for periods along the way, and then they become very familiar, less than perfect, less than the idealized person you had hoped would be there with you in your life. In other words, they become human. And you have to look at all of this and go, okay, this is not the journey that I had imagined. It's not the journey I had predicted for myself. This is not the way I thought the world was going to go. And there is an extraordinary loss of confidence that can occur with people in their journeys, both material and spiritual. And the real question mark is, how do I gain the trust? How do I understand that even though everything has just gotten thrown into a whole new direction, that the predictability of things that seem so certain is no longer predictable? How do I find the trust that this is where it is and supposed to be, and so how do I trust where it's going? And in a way, that's your practice. Finding trust. Not because somebody else tells you, not because it's taught, not because other people seemingly have gotten wherever you think you're trying to go. Trust in the fact that what's happening moment to moment to moment is what must be happening. What leading you to where you must go. One of the things that works for us is a very strong sense of when we're not going where we're supposed to go. When we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. There's something called guilt. And guilt is a very strong motivator because it really says what you're doing is quote unquote wrong. Not good for you, not good for others. It's a very, very extraordinary force. And when that force comes into play, it can be directive or it can be punishing. It's something that tells you, do not do that. It can say it with a club over the head, or it can just sort of nudge you. Hey, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't say that. Don't go there. And if you listen to it, it helps guide you on the journey. If you don't listen to it, you create circumstances for yourself that make it harder to move forward and make it harder to trust where you're going. You become, in a sense, the impediment to the journey. Your lack of trust creates a reason, in a sense, not to trust. But to walk through life in a state of distrust is to suffer dramatically in the world. The feeling it won't work out. This isn't how it should have been. I want it to be different. What did I do wrong? All of these things that cloud people's minds and kind of get in the way of their day-to-day reality are all, in a sense, a failure to trust. Every week I basically point you to the same place of where trust arises from, where directionality comes from, where the navigation system derives from. And it's a place of deep knowing, buried profoundly in your heart chakra, buried because you have to dig to get there, because it doesn't always just burst out of your chest and say, oh, do this, do that. It really comes out of a kind of struggle in life that turns you either inward to look for help and guidance, or pushes you further and further into the outer world, where you will find yourself stumbling a great deal. Going inside, which means sitting still, being quiet, hearing your own inner voice, is essential to the human journey. It is very hard to trust the journey when you don't trust the self that is moving through the journey, that is, in a sense, guiding you through this extraordinary unknowing. You have to go quietly inside into your heart chakra, in your chest, and just go in and, if you will, pull up an easy chair, put your feet out by the fire, sit back, relax, and say, please help me. Help me find my way. Help me know what to do. Relax into it. Don't come there with tension. Don't come there with drama. Don't come there with, I need, give me now, or I'm going to be in trouble. Come in there in a relaxed, open space. Sit there quietly and say, please help me. And as you're sitting by the fire, feet laid out in front of you, relaxed and calm, this sense of envelopment will overtake you. And this sense of assuredness, and this sense of, this is the directionality that I need, so that when you walk back out the door, you close the door and you walk back into the cold world, you have this assurance that, one, the fire and the hearth are waiting for you, and two, that you have a kind of idea how to function in the next step of your life. As a writer, when I would come into these moments of not knowing, and I had to produce, I had to create stories that would continue to unfold and ultimately wrap up in some way that was satisfying to people, what happened is I would sit down and go, okay, I don't know where to go now, I don't know what to do. And I would lay back in my chair, I would get quiet, I would enter my heart, I would just sit there, I wouldn't make demands, I would just make myself present, and I would wait. And every single time, and I mean this over the course of an entire career, the next thing that was needed came through, opened up inside me. I sat there and went, ah, and I would sit up and start writing. What I needed was delivered. It was delivered so readily and so continually that this trust that I'm talking about came not out of an abstract, but out of an absolute given. I knew what I needed to do next. It was told to me. It was clear. And it was concrete. It wasn't like some vague idea of, I should do this or do that. It was like, this is what it is. This is the next step in the story. And sometimes the next step in the story wouldn't be the right step. It would seem not to work. But it would be, it's not working, that would show me what had to happen. So it wasn't always like it was, here's the line, here is a line that you should take. And I would take the line and I would begin to write that line in, and I'd go, oh my God, this character wouldn't really say that. But if they hadn't said the wrong line, I wouldn't have gotten to the right one. So I trusted the universe not to say, I'm doing it for you, but here is what you need that will help you do it for yourself. Here's what you need. And we all have to find that guidance system. There's one part of it that resides in the heart chakra, if you will, and there's another part of it that resides in the gut, in the navel chakra, down below your belly. There is a place below your belly that has the same kind of knowing that the heart does, but it has another element in it that is really essential, which is power, or what we call in current contemporary talk, empowerment. We find empowerment in the gut, in the belly. We take the feelings, the emotions, the intelligence of our being, and we take them to a place of productivity where we can manifest the thing we feel and think. Manifesting the thing you feel and think makes you effective in the world, and becoming effective in the world makes you trust the world, makes you trust life, because you are not feeling this extraordinary sense of trusting the journey. You are actually imbibing the journey with this trust. You are walking into the world with this sense of, I can take a step and the ground will be there beneath me until it isn't. Until it isn't. When everything you know gets shaken up, for example, Blanche and I were in the 1994 Northridge earthquake in Northridge, California, and the ground literally got shaken up. Our house shook, everything fell off the shelves, televisions came flying off, everything came flying off. The ground did not hold. Reality and security did not hold. But we held each other's hands, we waited till it was over, we ran to see if everybody was okay, and we got out of the house. And we sat outside in the cold, in the middle of the night, and we knew that nothing would be the same exactly. And then we rebuilt our lives. But not at one point during that earthquake did anything in me not trust the journey. The journey had just suddenly shifted gears. It had shattered. It had erupted into something completely different. Instantaneously, out of the blue, no preparation, different. Our neighbors next door left their house that afternoon and never came back. It was a big, damaging earthquake. We had damage, but nothing on the level of some of the people around us, which was interesting because it had such a finger-pointing quality. This house was gone. This house was had minor damage, just like tornadoes. But you understand that life can come through and blow it all apart, blow it completely to smithereens, and if you survive it, then you have a real journey ahead, a journey of recreation, a journey now based on an unbelievably powerful message that the whole thing can be blown apart. It can be blown apart in an instant. Knowing that either deepens the journey and makes you a more open and available traveler on the road, or it means you want to build your house by the side of the road and never get out of it again. But if you have had earthquakes, you know that's not going to work. Stuff comes at all of us all the time. We don't know how, we don't know why. And ultimately, every one of us gets thrown the biggest loop available, which is the one that takes you out of here. It can be instantaneous, it can be slow in its development, but every one of us gets removed from this place in which we have tried to find ultimate security and comfort, with the realization there is no ultimate security and comfort. Not in the world. Because whatever you find yourself getting will ultimately be taken away. So how do you prepare to trust a journey in which it's all taken away? Well, perhaps by not attaching. Don't get as attached to it as you may feel you want to. Don't think that this person you're living with will take care of you forever, because they may not be around forever. Don't believe that the house you're living in is on solid ground. Don't believe that the career you have will go on forever, because nowadays we're very aware careers change radically and rapidly and unpredictably. Don't build solid structures in a world that is fluid. Create the moment, live in the moment, know that the moment will cohere for a period of time. Be grateful for every bit of the coherence, because I know when I wake up and the ground is still solid, I go, wow, wow. Because we live in a place where earthquakes happen all the time. And we know that any minute it could happen. We don't walk around usually thinking about it, which probably is a relief, but we have to walk around knowing it. Just knowing that nothing is permanent. Buddha said it is impermanent. Trusting in impermanence to still give you something that you might find to be fulfilling and satisfying. What is fulfilling and satisfying? A glass of water? Juice? Peanut butter sandwich? A hug from somebody you care about? A letter or an email from someone you think highly of? an acknowledgement in the way someone looks at you or takes your hand or says hello or says thank you. I know this is kind of beyond common ground for all of us. We all know that these little tiny gestures have immense meaning and value. But what I think is that they have absolute value. Every hug that you get, every pat on the shoulder, everybody who squeezes your hand, anyone who looks in your eye and gives you an acknowledgement and loves you or likes you even, just is kind to you, is such an enormous gift. It's so beyond anything you can imagine. Life is not about the big stuff, whatever that may be. It is built upon moment-to-moment expression of kindness, compassion, acknowledgement, otherness, embrace, the joy, the simple joy of a day. That's what it is. And what you discover, taking step after step, is that the ground mostly stays solid. The wind comes when you're really hot, or there's a glass of water waiting for you after a long walk, or you come home and there's a cookie in the cupboard that really, really tastes good, or these tiny little incremental things that are essentially the goodness and kindness and the joy of your life. I know we all look for the big stuff. And I will tell you, I've been lucky in a way of having had the big stuff. I had, a very successful career. I've had and have a beautiful family and grandchildren and all those things. But the having had in no way builds a life. It's already done. I had something. It assembled itself moment to moment to moment, hug by hug, kindness by kindness, difficulty by difficulty. It assembled itself in a way that is now past tense. I don't live based on what was. I can't live on it because it's inert and dead and past. I live on, bless you, I live on this. What is this? What is this? Bless you. Over and over and over again, I ask myself that question, what is this? And the answer that keeps coming back to me is the joy of standing on solid ground, the joy of walking outside, the joy of going for a walk, eating a good meal, hugging my wife, seeing you guys. This is what life is. And once you understand that these tiny incremental pieces are what is essential to trusting the journey, you begin to know that you don't have to trust some ultimate anything. You trust this very second, this very moment. If you walk around disappointed that you haven't had or fearing that you won't get, you're going to miss it all. You're going to miss the entire ride. The whole ride is not based on what should have been, would have been, was, or what will be, could be, might never be. It has nothing to do with it. The absolute trust of the journey is the trust in this moment. And if you're sitting alone in a house and no one's talking to you and no one's calling you and you're completely saddened by your isolation, find a way to connect. Find a way to connect, if only to yourself. Find a way to connect. This, forefinger and thumb together, that touch is beyond supernatural. It is beyond metaphysical. Touching yourself, this touch of the material existence of your being, is a phenomenal act of recognition and connection to your own physiological, biological, emotional, intellectual self. Touch yourself. Feel yourself inside. And then realize that this self will guide you and direct you. It will take you outside and maybe take you to the ice cream parlor, maybe take you to the library, maybe take you to a movie, maybe take you to a friend's house, maybe suggest that you actually call somebody and reach out to them instead of waiting for them to call you. it will begin to be directive, so that you're not sitting around feeling, what's wrong with me, why didn't I get, why didn't it happen? That's a complete waste of time and a lack of trust. The journey will propel you forward. It will propel you into action. It will give you life, moment to moment. And nobody else can do it. You know, I can sit here and do these talks forever, and all they can do is try to get you to get yourself in motion, to get yourself in gear, to take charge, to be you, to trust this journey that is emanating through your biological, physiological, intellectual, and emotional, and gut level self. Engage this thing, bring it into being, go into the world, and make the world yours. You don't have to make the world yours in terms of building towers and, and creating, legacies. You make the world yours by touching it, by feeling it, by examining it, by looking at it, by smelling it, by drawing it in, by trusting step by step that it is there for you. This is what we're here for. And to miss that is such a terrible loss. And this idea of a spiritual life, to whatever it means to be spiritual, to get to the cosmic core of this, to get beyond this, to get to higher consciousness. You can't get to higher consciousness if you don't have consciousness. You can't get to the higher thing if you haven't had the very real thing that's here. And the very real thing ultimately reveals itself as the high and the low of existence. This is it. This is the dynamic it that we're all looking for. This is it. And if you don't trust it, getting there isn't going to help. Because there is no there if you don't have this foundation of this. And I get so thrown by this idea that people have of having, a spiritual life as though it's separate from this life. It's not separate from this life. It is this life. This is it. This is the journey. This is the journey. Trust it. And you are at the front of the line. You are at the front of the line. You are not somebody who is following anybody. You may make it in your head that you're following somebody, that you're on a path, that somebody else has the candle ahead of you. You are the head of the line. It's your journey. Nobody else can do it for you. Nobody else will do it for you. They can love you through it. They can give you advice. They can give you prescriptions. They can give you medication and prescriptions. You are the one who has to figure it out. Period. And the source of all knowledge, the source of all wisdom, the source of all infinite genius in the universe is inside you. That's the incredible thing. It's not just in Albert Einstein, it's not just in Rudy or Nityananda or these other great saints. It's in you. Not to know that is to disparage your true self. Every one of those guys was connected to the very thing that you're connected to, and if you don't know you're connected to it, and you're not living in connection to it, then you're wasting your time. You're wasting your own day. You get to the end of your life angry and miserable. What was that about? It's not what this journey is about. It's not to get to the end and think you blew it. It's to get to the end and go, thank you for every minute along the way. Every minute. And then this last minute, whatever it may be, this last second, will be like the epitome of the journey. It'll be the final yes to the what is. If you can get to that, you might be trembling in your boots, but you'll be there. You'll show up for that moment. You'll be part of that essence, that finality that this journey represents. All journeys have an end. How you get to that end is everything. The journey, is the path, is what you're living for, but the end is the final moment. And if you've trusted it every step along the way, trust me, you'll trust that moment. If you trust the journey, you will trust the end of the journey. If you don't trust the journey, you will be trembling with fear at the end of it. The only path through this life is the one you're on. Period. however it aligned itself, however it created itself, however you were given the situations that you've been given, however much it seems blessed or cursed, it is yours. And I know this as a storyteller. Every story has conflict and drama and difficulty and all these things that go on. But what's the joy of great storytelling is how all of those are turned into the recipe for something you might call transcendent or completing or beautiful and joyful. The great stories are people who overcome adversity. The great stories are people who find love in a world that seems loveless and not possible. The great stories are people who take the given and turn it into something really remarkable. And how do they do that? They find this thing inside themselves that moves beyond their limitations, beyond their fears, beyond their doubts and lack of trust. It takes them there because they discover by saying yes and trusting moment to moment, you get to where the world will celebrate you, or more importantly, you will celebrate yourself. You celebrating yourself is what this is all about. Not even celebrating like throwing a big party for yourself. Just going, good job. Good job. That was a good ride. You did it. You did it. You got there. That's the journey we're on. And my biggest admonition to you, my biggest directive, my biggest hope is that you trust this journey. Because that's the only way through it. And there's something in you that does trust it, or you wouldn't be here now. There's something in you that does trust it, or you wouldn't get in your car. You wouldn't take a step out the door. There's something in you that does trust it because you eat the food on the table in front of you and you don't run from it thinking you're about to be killed or poisoned by what you take in. You do trust. Trust me, you do trust. Just embrace that trust. Make it big. Make it real. Make it dynamic. And then live this life so that it means something to you and makes you feel in the end it was worth it. Any questions?
I was struck in talking about, as you get, that older people tend to talk about their past. And now that I'm getting older, that may be happening to me too. But I'm just struck about how you said it's not about the past, it's about staying present in this moment. And so there must be something about getting older that makes us want to not do that and look at the past. I don't know.
It's
just
the natural thing for people whose minds are continually active. And they get to a certain point and there's a very limited future that they can see. They have never learned the present tense. They've never learned how to be present without dissecting it and being angry at it or disappointed or whatever. They only have one place to go with a very active mind, which is the incredible bank of memories that they carry. Real memories are false memories, because after a while that you don't even know what you remember. And so people tend to go backward into the past and dig around, and often into areas that are not so great, like regrets and angers and hostilities, or past glories, reliving them at every opportunity. Yeah. If you hang around with people like that, it is an empty and painful experience. And I watch people getting old. I am definitely one of those people, and it's very very hard for me watching what's going on with almost everybody I know. It's really I don't have many people on the spiritual path who live in my proximity, Blanche and I, really, and I guess those of you who are starting to feel like you're getting older, but it's really powerful at a certain point. And I have friends who are not on that path, whose lives are disintegrating, physically and emotionally, and I'm watching it happen, and there's nothing I can do. There's just nothing I can do. It's a life of not having been present does not suddenly turn into present tense. If anything, it's the worst thing to go to it, because the present is so awful, and the future's worse. So, back away. And I get it, I totally get it. It's how most people live and die. If you want, quote unquote, the spiritual version of this, you find your way so firmly into the present tense that that pain of disintegration which comes about is perceived in a present tense sensibility, and it has a number of elements. One of them is liberation, liberating you from all the old stuff, all the past tense stuff that you could be dwelling in continually. It frees you from that. It makes you very focused on Blanche walking in the room and says, here's a cookie with your tea. You have no idea what a joy that is. You have no idea. I go, oh, thank you. And I eat that cookie and I drink the tea, and we sit there and we watch TV or we do whatever we're doing. The moment is so resonant and so rich and so acknowledged. And it's really beautiful. And it's what I've got, what Blanche has got. We have each other. We're surrounded by children and grandchildren. And there's stuff going on, so there's certain ripples that go out and make demands. But what we have is getting smaller and smaller and tighter and tighter. It's harder for us to reach out and try to have dinner parties and go out to places. Some people are good at it, but as you get older, it's really hard. Life just gets more and more, just get through the day. But getting through the day can be spectacularly exciting. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think you all know, to the boring point now, that I started making photographs. So I walk through the day, and the stuff comes at me and stops me in my tracks. The smallest little thing, wallpaper, something on the sidewalk, and I just stop, literally stop, and I take a picture of it, both as not as a final work usually, a few times, but mostly as raw material for something creative that could come later. But what it does is it makes me look and say, wow, there is beauty underneath my feet, on the wall, in the tree, and everywhere around me. And it's giving me a life of present tense discovery that makes me happier to be around than I've ever been. Ever. And then I was talking to my grandson the other day, and we were talking about falling in love. He didn't understand the word to fall in love. It didn't make sense to him why you fall. But we were talking about how it would happen, and he said, I love you. I fall in love with you. What he said. That's all I needed for a month or a year. It was so beautiful because he understood love, and he understood how you enter into it and how it overtakes you on some level. And he was so joyous in that, and I was so joyous. So I'm looking at these incremental moments, and they build something better than the Oscar sitting on my nightstand in L.A. I do not look at that and get swells of joy. I know I had a career that had a certain substance, but but it doesn't hold me together. It doesn't resonate. It gave me some money to live on. That helps. I don't have to deal every day with how to make enough money to get through the day. That becomes its own drama. And there are many people, many people living that drama. But I would say, even when I was living that drama, which I was at certain points in my life, where Blanche and I had very little, we still had this moment-to-moment reality, because we had been practicing sitting and meditating and connecting for years already. And so I offer it up as a way of getting through your life that's really better than my mother-in-law, who in her 70s and 80s did nothing but complain about the people who did her wrong for hours on end. And she would suck you into these horrible, horrible dramas. And I hated having to see her. I hated going to her house. I did not want to be sucked into this, and I was over and over and over. And it's not a good way to go. But she was a good woman who just couldn't get over these past tense problems. But then what happened, and I've said this many times, she became demented, Alzheimer-like, and all these memories fell away, and she became this other person. She became sweet, just like a nice person. All of that stuff was gone, and the past was taken away, and the present revealed itself, and she had no sense of future, so she just was. And it was beautiful to see you get there. So when I say trust the journey, even she, in the most awful of circumstances, and she had terrible circumstances in her life, including losing 2 children, she ended her life in a state of, I use this expression a lot, that's her last expression. What are you going to do? Totally simple, joyous, quiet, and accepting, and she died 2 hours later. That's like, okay. So you don't have to have a spiritual life to get there, but there is a journey, and she was on that journey, and her journey took her to this place that perhaps I have learned to get to before, my deathbed. And I'm sharing it with you because you can do the same thing. You can make the same journey. You can have the same ride. It's available to everybody. That's why we're here. You just have to trust it. Anyone else? Okie doke. We're here next week and the week after, and then a little bit of a hiatus because I'm going to be traveling. Thank you. Lots of love.